Welcome to the Volquest.com podcast presented by Blue Water Climate Control. Remember, check them out on Twitter at BlueH2O_climate with Austin Price, Brent Hubbs, Volquest.com. Plenty of things to get to. Austin, Tennessee coaches, some of the coaches meeting the media to talk about the effects of the coronavirus on their programs, on college life. Philip Fulmer addressing the media as well. I think the biggest takeaway for me is just a simple fact of the reality that this semester is over. Like, there's not going to be any student athletes on campus. You know, Kelly Harper saying none of her players will be here. Rick Barnes saying he didn't expect any of his players to be here. There's one baseball player that's going to be on campus next week because he can't get home to Australia and doesn't want to go home.
Rick talking about, Santiago Vescovi trying to get home to his family, and the flight being X amount, and, NCAA is allowing them to pay up to $1,000. I mean, it really, when you start hearing numbers like that, and then you just kind of see an empty campus, and that's when it really kind of just smacks you in the face.
Yeah, the finality that there's just not going to be anything active going. I mean, it's shut down. I mean, and look, I understand I'm not saying it's not where we need to be, but the fact that it is the reality that things are shut down. There is no work in the weight room. Nobody's going to be working out in the Anderson Training Center.
Which puts onus on each individual kid to get their work done. So you can bet, much like when, Craig Fitzgerald sends out, the weight plan to a kid who's going to be enrolling in a couple months to get him a head start, they're going to send that same thing home with these kids now, but it's the current team, which is, scary, because, it's real easy to go home and play PlayStation and hang out with your buddies and eat poorly, and, you're going to, no matter what sport it is, each coach is going to find out who he can get in the bunker with, when they roll back in here, whether they're, I'm not going to say they have to be in tip-top shape, but if they've let themselves slide to a point where, like, all of a sudden it's going to take several weeks to get them back, into playing shape.
Well, don't you think that for guys who have played a lot of meaningful snaps, they played a lot of meaningful minutes, whatever their sport is, they understand the value of that more than a guy who thinks he ought to be playing and doesn't really understand why he's not been playing more? Maybe that guy doesn't get it as well. And I think that's where you may see it creep up, is in the depth standpoint, because I'm not sure some of those guys who haven't played a lot, who maybe you have to try to drag along in practice, in a formal practice, how much are they going to do when somebody's not there? I don't know. I think that's going to be one of the storylines we talk about whenever we get back to a normal sports life.
I think, in a perfect world, you could, like, quad them up, it's not going to always work, but, like, all the Nashville Vols, they get together and work out together. Cade Cooper, Tyler Barron, who would be here by the time, the team rolls back onto campus, along with, maybe Ollie Lane or Jacob Warren. Get all those guys together in Knoxville and let them work out together and do the stuff. I think there can still be some accountability there if you kind of pot them up, based off of, like, location. Again, there's going to be some that, when they go home, they're not going to be within 200 miles of any teammate. Right. But, there are pockets where you could conceivably say, hey, Cade, you're in charge of the Nashville or the Knoxville Vols. Trey Smith, can you get together, with some West Tennessee guys? You know what I'm saying? I feel like there's ways you can do that from a leadership standpoint, and it may help you. It's kind of the Paul Azinger pod system from the Ryder Cup in 2008. That where you kind of become teams. It works on your team chemistry on the whole by using a smaller group of kids. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how all this plays out.
Yeah, no doubt about that. I think the other thing too that jumped out for me from the press conference was, and I'd written a story on this. We later added quotes from Coach Fulmer, but I had wondered about this earlier in the day. As a coach leading a program, you have to be concerned about the academics of finishing the semester with your student athletes not on campus. There's no Thornton Center. Look, virtual tutoring, I get, but it's not the same thing as somebody sitting in a cubicle over your shoulder helping you work on something.
Yeah.
Okay, it's just not the same thing. So to me, if I were a coach, one of my biggest concerns outside of the health and safety, and that's a given, okay? So I don't want anybody to listen to this to go, well, they don't care. I mean, that's obviously a given. I'm saying beyond that, if I'm a coach, one of my concerns is about my student athlete being able to finish the semester the right way. Are they going to get it done academically? The other thing, too, is you got some guys out there who are signees that still need to do a little work on the test. There's no test to take. Those dates are canceled. There is no ACT. There is no SAT test. So if you're short on the test right now and you're planning on taking the test next week, or you had an April testing date, that's not happening. You can't do that. So I thought Coach Fulmer's answer to that question, which stated he thinks there'll be some relief given by the NCAA, a little bit of help there, that maybe you get a waiver, kind of implied maybe you get a waiver on some stuff. I thought was an interesting question, because if you're the NCAA, if I'm a student athlete and I'm in school at the college level.
You're 1 point shy.
Well, let's just say let's do this first. Let's do the college first, okay? And I need to pass 6 hours or 9 hours to be eligible, and I don't pass a class. Then I can come back to the NCAA and say I was not given every opportunity because there was no academic assistance for me available. So how much leeway is the NCAA going to give on that? Coach Fulmer certainly anticipates some kind of leeway on that. With the ACT, if you're 1 point away, but where's that number going to be? If somebody's got they're not going to be able to let somebody who's got a 15 who needs an 18, they're probably not going to do that. But there's going to have to be some give and take there, it appears.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to say rubber stamp them onto the next grade, but at the same time, I mean, this is not your common everyday occurrence, and so the way all this plays out and the decisions that are made will, to me, affect everyone, and there's a trickle down to me. Depending on, like as you said, is it 1 point? Is it 2 points? Is it 0 points? I mean, who knows? I mean, they could just say, "Oh well," I mean, I think I think you could see some type of legal action from a prospect if they try to take the ability to play away based off of the fact that two test opportunities were canceled because of the coronavirus. I mean, so I mean, to me, it's going to be how does all this play out? What do they do? Because I think there's a difference between the academic help and needing points on a test score. And so and the fact is like right now, player X, Y, and Z, they still can do the online work. They have to find a way to pass the class, but they'll have an opportunity. The test score, if there's no test, there's no opportunity.
Or if you come back and your makeup opportunity is in July, okay, and you're supposed to be here for summer school already. I mean, just a lot of questions, a lot of things that the more you sit around and you kind of have free time, as I've had, you start thinking about stuff and you start questioning, you start wondering, well, how are they going to do this or how are they going to do that? Jesse had asked this question to me in a text the other day. He said, what are they doing about nutrition? And I asked Coach Fulmer in the press conference, you got some players who have apartments here that are going to come back here. They may not go home, okay? They may not be able to come to campus, but they got to leave some apartment. They think they're an adult. They're going to go to their apartment, hang out.
Sure.
But what are they going to eat? Well, they can, Coach Fulmer said today, they can provide basically to-go boxes for those guys to come by and pick up a meal here, which is good.
Yeah, that is good.
Because that's something that you don't think about, but that could be, an element. I mean, we're seeing that at the elementary, middle school, and high school levels around the country where, kids don't get 3 square meals a day, so schools are making some things available that way.
You know what baffles me is just kind of the difference. You got the SEC June 30th. They've postponed everything till at least June 30th. TWA, they meet today. They vote to not. They're going to still try to get in the TWA basketball tournament in May. Still, they're not punting on it.
Right.
Which I mean, again, as I've said, of course, what I think doesn't matter to anybody. But what I've said is I think that the people that are just saying let's postpone for now and reevaluate. 3 weeks from now, this thing could be way worse, and 3 weeks from now, you don't know where it could be. So I mean, It's just interesting to see the different dynamics on the same day that the SEC says everything's done till June 30th. I mean, how does that affect, recruiting? I mean, there were going to be guys that took visits in the summer. You got a guy like Chase Hayden who's trying to figure out where he wants to play his final 2 years of eligibility. All of a sudden, right now, at the earliest he can do anything is July. That's a tough ask. I mean, because he was wanting to take 5 visits. You got like Andre Turrentine commits to Ohio State, on Tuesday. Now, he had set up an official visit to visit Tennessee in July. Now, I think that visit was probably still going to take place even though he committed. But, now all of a sudden, in June, he was going to visit there in June. What does that, look like now that June is off the table? People have been asking me, what's the deal with Ohio State, the run they're on? What's the run they're on? I think it's pretty simple. Ohio State's, and I've been told this by a couple of different people, Ohio State's telling people, who knows what this year will linger. They're not saying that people aren't going to take official visits, but I think that seed of doubt about not being able to visit has been created with people, and all of a sudden you see people just reserving their spots. That's a big deal, is just getting your spot locked in. I mean, there'll be some of these kids that'll come back open down the road. So, I mean, just how these next few months play out, from the nutrition to the weightlifting to the academics. I mean, you talk about 3 big things. I mean, it's massive. I mean, determining whether a kid is academically eligible, where they are at physically. And these square meals that they get over here and they come over here and pick up, that could be the difference between 7 pounds, and 7 pounds the right way, come, August.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. Back to the recruiting thing that I think is going to be another factor to watch and to keep an eye on. And we'll have a story up on this a little bit later on. And I had visited with Mike Farrell. We were talking about some things. He thinks there's going to be a massive number of decommitments once things get back to normal, because he thinks a lot of people are going to do what these kids are doing with Ohio State. A lot of people are just taking a placeholder, marking their spot. And then they're going to open it back up, and who knows what's going to happen. He made an interesting point to me in our conversation. Does the NCAA wipe off the early signing period because kids were not afforded, or schools were not afforded an opportunity?
An ample opportunity.
Kids were not given an ample opportunity to take all their visits, da-da-da-da-da. Does the NCAA, is there a push from coaches to say, hey, we haven't had enough time to evaluate them, we haven't had enough time to get them on our campus and all these things. Well, we want to push this thing back to February. I don't know if that's realistic or not.
Let's go in a perfect world. In a perfect world, the kids can start rolling in on July 1. That's based, and let's say they wait.
What do you mean rolling in? Because that's during a dead period.
Yes, but let's say that they say, okay, we've had 3 months of a dead period.
I got you. Okay,
we're going to allow people to start coming on campus July 1.
You're saying what happens if the NCAA says, hey, it's been dead, we're going to open up the recruiting world July 1.
Yeah, but in retrospect, though, they say because there was no spring ball, you get an extra week of fall camp. So all of a sudden, fall camp starts July 24th. You're going to have about a 3-week run there to get kids to campus. Well, I mean, everybody's going to be pulling at these kids. They're only going to be able to take a couple of visits because these kids because they're going to have their high school seasons up against it.
And remember, they've missed their spring in their high school, and they've missed a lot of their summer workouts.
Yeah.
So their coach is going to be more adamant than ever before about July.
Stay home.
You stay home.
So yeah, that goes back to what you're saying, and what and Mike has kind of inferred is there could be a push there to eliminate the December signing period for this 1 year, just to allow everybody room to breathe. Because otherwise, again, you're going to have a situation where kids make knee-jerk reactions. Teams take kids just to take them to have numbers, and then, at that point, you're really relying, as someone told me earlier this week, if you can't have camp season and you can't go out for the spring evaluation period, you're going to have to rely on your eyes. And when, some people are really good at that, some people are not, based off tape. There's a difference between watching tape and, understanding what a kid, can do, and then seeing the kid in person, and understanding, okay, this kid doesn't play against great competition, but he's got this long arm. He's got this time of shuttle. All these type of things you can see in a camp setting here during the summertime. Who knows how that plays out?
Do you think, as a byproduct of not having spring practice, not having those things, there will be a greater depth of evaluation because coaches don't have anything to do. So, I mean, they got to watch it on tape.
Yeah, but there's
Obviously,
only
they
so
can't
much
get out
tape
there.
you can watch, though. I mean, like, you know.
Can you watch? I mean, do they watch whole games instead of highlights?
Yeah, I mean, I think you'd be forced to. I mean, what else are you going to do here for the next several months? There's only so much you can game plan, you know. And I think that's the other thing is all coaches, and I mean, let's face it, Nick, Jeremy, Jimbo, Kirby, those guys that are all cut from that kind of, you know, same cloth, what do? They put in long hours. Well, in this instance, you can only put in so many hours doing that kind of thing, so you better give your staff room to breathe and say, look, it is what it is. We're going to meet every day from 10 to 5. You don't have to be in here at 7 anymore. You're going to leave at 7. I just know how this room works over here with the current situation and knowing that you can't go out on the road, kids can't come to you, there will be no camps, all that. There's going to be a crazy amount of time that what do you do with it? Well, I mean, part of it you can maybe put towards game planning or working on recruiting, but that only goes so far. And here's the other thing for us, calling kids, what can change in a kid's recruitment when he can't go anywhere and he can't see anything? The best thing that's going for Tennessee is like Hudson Wolf. The last thing he will see until at least July is Tennessee. That doesn't mean they were going to get him, but again, he was here last. They had Peyton Page, Javari Ritzy, you know, all those kids from North Carolina, all those kids from Pennsylvania that were here the weekend before. One of the last things they really saw was what? Tennessee. That's a good thing. But in retrospect, Cayman Marley never made it here. It's gonna be hard to get him here when July rolls back around because of the things you just outlined. Same thing with a guy like Travion Henderson, who they were trying to get at the end of the month. Tennessee's still going to swing there, but you didn't make the top 9. He's wanting to make a decision probably sometime in the next month or two. You're probably not going to get that kid, at least right now, unless you can, pull a miracle out later. There's several kids like that never made it here. L.J. Johnson, running back from Texas, was set to come in at the end of the month. Ra Dillsworth was here in January, but didn't come with his mom. Said Tennessee didn't make his top 5 when he dropped it or top 6, because his mom's not been here. He just put basically the teams that his mom has seen in there. Well, I mean, she can't come here till at least July, and again, he was wanting to do something, in May. I mean, again, Tennessee could end up losing kids that maybe they had a shot with, maybe they didn't, but the chances went way down when all of a sudden you can't go see kids and they can't come see you for the next 3 months.
All right, let me tell you right quick about Blue Water Climate Control and their smooth sailing service plan. It's a semi-annual season inspection to perform routine checks, 10% off parts and labor on all HVAC repairs, an annual 40-point diagnostic of your entire heating and air system, including the ductwork, prioritize response to air conditioning repair and maintenance needs, never pay overtime fees for the weekend work and after-hour emergencies, a loyalty plan where you can accrue $100 a year towards a replacement heating and air system. Call them today at 865-299-2290 and ask them about the Smooth Sailing Service Plan. That's a Blue Water Climate Control. You can find out more at bluewaterclimatecontrol.com. Check them out on Twitter at blue_H2 or blue H2O_climate, blue H2O_climate. That is the Twitter handle for Blue Water Climate Control, and we certainly appreciate them. Let me ask another hypothetical thing. This was sort of asked to Coach Fulmer today, and he said, listen, we're in a time and we're hopefully that everybody's on board. Nobody's trying to get, some kind of competitive edge to all this type of stuff. How much FaceTime conversation, if you're a position coach, do you have with your players on your current team in regards to install stuff? Okay, look, you got some new position coach, you're learning some new techniques. How much does Jimmy Brumbaugh, over the course of the next 4 weeks, have you can group FaceTime right now?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not a technological whiz. You can group FaceTime, right?
You can.
How many can you have in a group?
I don't know. That's a good question.
Okay,
I've
but you have more than one, right?
I've done 3.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if you can do more than 3.
All right, so how much do you say, hey, we're going to set up a FaceTime call in the next week, once we're back to spring break's over, where we go over some install stuff. We're going to have we're going to have a camp. We're going to have an iPad set up, FaceTime. We're going to have the digital tape on there. We're going to show technique, and we expect you to be on with this. Do you think that's where we're going to get to? As you mentioned, coaches got free time looking to do something. How much do you see of that potentially happening out there? And I don't mean it's a negative thing. I'm just saying once we get a little more settled down, how much do you think it goes that direction?
I think you have to do it. And honestly, it's a big Chris Lowe and I talked about this on the Nation Sunday night. Clemson got it 9 practices this spring before it got halted. That's a huge advantage over Alabama, who never started, Tennessee, who got in 2, Georgia, I'm not sure how many they got in, but I know it was very small. That's a big advantage. Also a big advantage are teams that had staff continuity. Tennessee here, they're sitting here with Jay, Brumbaugh, Sheldon Felton. Brian Niedermeyer's learned a new position, so he's got different guys in his room.
Joe Ossovet.
So, there's all this change, and they didn't really get, outside of 2 T-shirts and short days, they didn't really get a feel for, what the coach is like.
But thankfully for Tennessee, the system doesn't change for
Correct.
the first time in 4 years.
Yeah, that's right. Offensively and defensively, it's the same terminology.
Jim Chaney was cramming a new system into everybody in 15 days. Imagine if you're a new head coach, new coordinator out there trying to install a new system and you didn't get any practice days.
That's huge. It's much like, all these NFL teams that are signing new players. Teddy Bridgewater went to play for Joe Brady, who's run the offense at Carolina. Well, he had already been with him in New Orleans. So there was, don't think he's not got a huge advantage there compared to, a quarterback that's, like Phillip Rivers going to the Colts. So, I think that, there is an advantage there from a philosophical standpoint.
But
terminology.
Your point about the turnover, understanding each other, knowing what somebody wants, what exactly they mean when they say this in regards to a technique, is something you do learn over 15 spring practices that these guys are not going to have.
Yeah, you get a feel for it. You get a feel for what a coach wants, how a coach is acting, knowing when, when coaches like this, that means that, just understanding how someone maneuvers and kind of acts goes a long way, I think, just because you're working with people every day. And for the coaches, you're working with kids, knowing, let's just use Jimmy Brumbaugh, for example. He's got a lot of linemen in that room that, have played a lot of football the last few years because Tennessee's gotten more depth along the defensive line. Well, understanding what makes Darrell Middleton tick, understanding what makes, Elijah Simmons tick, or Karat Garland or whoever, and understanding how hard you can coach them versus when to pull back.
Great point.
That could have an effect on a kid if you don't know how to coach them come August 20th.
Or late July, 1st of August, when you get out there and you're trying to figure it out in short order. That's a great point to me. Finally, as we wrap it up here, a couple other things from the press conference he had. I wasn't surprised by it because I don't think it's going to happen. I was maybe a little surprised how kind of clear they were. Kelly Harper said she just didn't know how giving an extra year of eligibility to the winter sports to her athletes would work. And Rick Barnes said he didn't see it happening because they had basically played a whole season. It is hard to see the winter sports getting that extra year. Track's all, the Beth Sullivan, the track coach, talking about she wants an extra year for the indoor season, the outdoor season. That's fall and spring. It's hard to imagine that happening, but those are all going to be interesting questions moving forward. But it doesn't sound like basketball coaches are going to be all on board for getting an extra year of eligibility for everybody. Well,
because sometimes, it's addition by subtraction. But, you're right. Let's face it. In a perfect world, Tennessee beats Alabama, loses the next game to Kentucky, and then, who knows how many games they get in the NIT, if they get in the NIT. So what's Jordan Bowden getting cut? A couple games, right. Between 2 and 6 games, depending on how long the run is in the NIT. He played between 80 and 95% of his season. I don't know how you give a kid extra eligibility for that. But I don't disagree, though, with the track coach. It's not her fault that they have a fall and,
sure. Same for tennis, right?
Springs type. Yeah, correct. It's not their fault that they have 2 seasons. So how do you go well, Johnny, you can't run this fall, but they're giving you an extra spring. They've given you an extra outdoor track season. So you can just go to classes and not get anything for it this fall and then come back and run in the spring. Well, what guy's going to do that if you're a track guy?
Right.
Unless you're just grasping onto your last little bit of, academic or athletic, life.
And Tony Vitello seemed to be talking like it was a mind blowing deal to try to figure out how you manage 11-point-something scholarships with guys getting extra. Even though they would get more scholarships, how do you manage all of that with incoming freshmen who you've promised a certain percentage to? Could you do that for them if you're bringing guys back? I mean, there's a lot of questions there that I think they need answered. That those programs are going to need answers to quickly from the NCAA, because if you're a high school senior in baseball, or particularly in baseball, and you think you're getting 30% or you think you're getting 50%, right now you're wondering, am I still going to get that if the senior who I was basically taking his spot is going to be back for another year?
Yeah.
Or the junior doesn't go to the draft who's going to be back for another year. I mean, one of the reasons the kid from TCU is at Tennessee now is because they had a guy at TCU didn't go to the draft and basically took that guy's spot, took his money. So that's going to be a real challenge to manage moving forward. Lots and lots and lots of questions, lots of uncertainties, lots of unknowns, more questions to discuss and debate moving forward, more topics to talk about, certainly plenty more football stuff to dive into, and we'll continue to do that as we move forward and continue to bring you all the content we can bring you as news continues to break, and we kind of examine all that's going to happen here in the next few weeks and months, which is very drastically different than what any of us ever thought it was going to be. And how it all shakes out, how it ends up playing out, beyond, we just don't know. And it's going to change, kind of the face of college athletics, at least for a year, and probably bring about some long-term rule changes as well. So we'll dive into all that moving forward. But that's going to do it for this edition of the Blue Water Climate Control Volquest.com podcast. For Austin Price, I'm Brent Hubbs. Thanks for joining us. Have a great day, everybody.